Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. Today I talked to Sushma Nagarkar, who has her doctorate in special education and is a nationally certified clinical psychologist. She started the Yash Charitable Trust, which helps people with disabilities and developmental disorders live better lives of dignity in their community. Today we're going to talk about mental health for adolescents and adults with disabilities, what issues come up, what kind of help is available, and what parents can do to lead happier lives and simpler lives. So check out the chat.
Health issues or mental health awareness in India are really very low down on people's priority lists. There are just, in many communities, just more pressing problems, and mental health kind of gets shoved by the wayside. So generally, overall, in communities, it's not an issue that is, or not something that's tackled easily. That being said, when mental health sort of doesn't have a priority in the world of disabilities, particularly developmental disabilities, it's even sort of neglected further. The awareness or the lack of awareness rather than the ignorance is just not something that's on people's agendas. Most families kind of focus on more of what intervention is going to help, what's going to work, just in terms of daily living. So again, although mental health is so much a part of daily living, it just doesn't get the attention it needs, particularly for people with autism, intellectual disabilities, and so on. It is unfortunate because all the research literature will tell you that people with developmental disabilities, and particularly autism and intellectual disabilities, have higher rates of mental health issues. There are issues that are just unrecognized and sort of shoved under the carpet. And this creates more difficulties in adulthood, certainly, for most of these populations. So young adults with developmental disabilities, as I said, in the research literature, it's well documented that they're at a higher risk. There are a couple of different reasons. Nobody has documented it's because it's not related to the intellectual disability, it's not related to the autism. It hasn't been documented that it's related in such a way. But there are other environmental stressors that certainly impact our adults. And also, if there is some kind of mental health or mental illness in the families, of course that's going to carry over. There is a hereditary component, no doubt. But the young adults with developmental disabilities particularly, it's more of dealing with life as such, that if we don't equip them well enough, which causes higher rates in my view. Quality of life issues also impact the well-being of adults, and therefore I believe that contributes to the higher preponderance rate as well. And these are issues that we can tackle. These are reasons rather that we can tackle. It's not something that's, hereditary in their genetic makeup. These are sort of things that we can do something about. In neurotypicals, for example, let me give you an example that might make it clearer. Adolescent behavior. We have a lot of adolescents who act out, get into temper tantrums, aggression, just behaviors that are just acting out, externalizing behaviors. A lot of time those are identified as being just bad behavior. But those are actually, in the literature, if you go back into the diagnostic criteria, those are actually could be some symptoms and characteristics of depression in adolescents. Likewise, people with autism, for instance, do have behavioral issues that come to the forefront and are seen more often than not, which also then could be attributed to some characteristics of depression other than just bad behavior. So you have to sort of consider all the perspectives in the holistic approach, even when trying to identify what's going on with the individual. So it's not a simple cause and effect as such, it's more like taking into account all the data that we have that surrounds or that individual is part of the environment, just parenting, just whatever it is that's in that individual's life. So it's very critical to consider all aspects. For people with autism in particular, the preponderance of ADHD, for instance, in persons with autism is at a higher rate. And that's been documented in the literature. And then comes anxiety disorders. So for like anxiety disorders, and anxiety is a part of the autism spectrum simply because it's just, the simplistic way of describing it is when they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So it's the person's difficulties with the social communication and all those communication issues that makes it difficult or challenging for them to try and fit into what we call neurotypical normal behavior as such. And that increases those anxiety levels. So different individuals will show or exhibit the anxiety very differently. But parents and caregivers have to sort of be on the ball as far as identifying, what are those precipitators, what are those signs, and it varies for individuals. So we have one young lady here who'll start doing this when her anxiety level shoots up, and we know that that's an issue for them. Another one of our young people will just his hand shaking in situations that he's really getting himself worked up about, that increases. So we know that those are signs that they need to remove themselves from the situation, get themselves together, and then so those are sort of just some indicators that we know of with our people that we work with. Identify the triggers one way, and then the behavioral psychologist would say that give him a replacement behavior instead of the hand flapping. So do it both together. One is identifying the trigger to try and change the environment such that anxiety doesn't shoot up for him, and identifying or sort of helping him pre the anxiety, whatever those triggers are, whatever those situations are, trying to prepare him. We all need preparation for everything we do, right? We don't suddenly go into situations, and more often than not, we put our adults into situations that they don't know how to handle. So we need that prep time for such individuals also, and then trying to give him something else to do if that behavior is considered socially inappropriate. And then the family members have a hard time dealing with it in a social situation, which some do and some don't. One thing that we as an entity propagate, but also what is most important and most beneficial for individuals, is wraparound services across individuals and having it be a team effort when we're looking for solutions. So it's not just parents meeting with a psychiatrist. Medication is only one piece of it. Along with medication, what has been shown to work is cognitive behavioral therapy for people with autism who are verbal, who have communication. And it's a modified version of CBT. The other things that help are then art-based therapy, music-based therapy, things like that which are going to help them deal with the anxiety in those ways. Dance, DMT also is one of them. But it has to be a sort of everything together, as in everyone has to work together towards common goals. So you can't have parents working on one goal, which may be just the hand flapping, but it's actually in actual fact the anxiety associated with that hand flapping. So there has to be the medicine, what the medicine does, and I know a lot of parents are anti-medicine, and again, it's their decision whether to give it or not. But what medication will do is, in simple terms, create the ground, create sort of the environment for then the other therapies to help, to work. So it's something that one should consider in extreme cases. By no means am I advocating that you have to put people on medication, but it's something to consider along with therapies. Just the medication in and of itself is not enough. Likewise, just the therapy, if it's an extreme case, in and of itself is not enough. So it's a multimodal method, and that has got the best outcomes, absolutely the best outcomes for people who need it. So an evaluation by a psychiatrist, definitely, or a neurologist, as the case may be, developmental pediatrician in some cases, by a psychologist or a counselor being involved in modified version of CBT, along with whatever therapy that person is interested in. So it could be music, it could be dance, it could be art, it could be other. YCT, what YCT does, one of the umbrellas of YCT is what we call the Adult Support Kendra. We're a group of professionals. I'm one of this group, and we have other people from Forum for Autism and elsewhere. We come together under ASK to provide mental health services to individuals and families. So we work with the families primarily to support that individual. Part of that is really, what is the long-term goal for that individual? What is, when that individual is transitioning from school, what does that look like for the individual? And it's not something that's set in stone, but it's an exploration, and that should happen while that person is in school, of what he or she is going to do post-school. Because the post-school question mark is a very, very big one. And unless we have those pieces in place, the chances of mental health issues cropping up are much higher, which is part of the whole thing, that we have to plan accordingly. And it's planning not just for the individual, but it's a family planning that has to happen. In fact, how the families are going to create those opportunities for whatever that individual is interested in. How will that look? How will the financial piece of it look? What are the individual's interests, likes? What does the exploration look like? Transportation issues in our case very often. So all of these, the conversations for those, if they start while that person is still in a vocational center or school or wherever, certainly helps with the transition process. Through ASK, we do workshops for transition issues. We do workshops on sexuality, which is another big area. We help families navigate sort of the adult world of developmental disabilities. Far too often when the behaviors or when the issues are at a critical stage is when we see families. So I think it's really important, and I can't tell you what the preventive would be, but certainly just like you and I want a good quality of life for ourselves, our individuals too want that. So having those aspects of our lives front and center. Do we have relationships? Do we have friends? Is there someone we can turn to? All our individuals want that, whether we have autism or we don't. Everyone wants all of these things, which is that quality of life. So thinking about those things for our individuals with disabilities as well. It's not about putting them somewhere and keeping them busy. They have a lot to give back, as we well know, to our communities. The other thing is just being aware that educating ourselves, and there's a lot of good literature out there. It's just that the websites that one goes to has to be sort of well identified and well respected, of what those behaviors may look like. That may be not a behavior problem, but also may be symptoms of something else that's going on. And then seeking help straight, right then and there, rather than waiting. So we're trying to sort of move backwards into this sphere of educating. And that's another thing we do through ASK, is educating families, what to look for. But it's a long road. It's a long road. When I go out and do workshops with groups of parents, one of the questions that I ask the parents is, how many of you spend time by yourselves doing something fun with each other? And the answers I get will be 5% of the audience or 10% max of the audience. People don't take the time out for themselves. And that, in my mind, is the most critical aspect. The autism, Down syndrome, whatever it is not going to go away. We need to be able to create a life for our individual that is going to be meaningful for them. And it takes a lot of effort from parents and a lot of energy from parents to try to do this, because that's what we do. So we need to sort of step back and take time out to get our own mental health into a balanced frame. So taking time out for parents is really, really critical. And when parents find that, this is too overwhelming, I'm losing sleep, or I'm not eating enough, or, I'm just withdrawing into myself, I don't know what to do kind of a thing, that is the time to go out. I mean, there are a lot of us out there who are parents and professionals who understand completely, and there are lots of professionals who understand as well. So that's the time to go out and take care of yourself first, because when you are in a good, balanced state, that's the time that you're going to be able to give the best to your loved one, who's so fun, at the end of the day.
Guys, so I hope you liked today's conversation. I hope Sushma was able to help you overcome your own fear and the background noise that is stopping you from getting out there and getting help. If you want to talk to Sushma and other professionals like her who can help you and your family, one way is to log on to our website www.reservoirnap.com. All the other steps are mentioned in the description. Please subscribe to our channel and our social media accounts for more such conversations.